Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. Now the news continues in Southern Africa, where Zimbabweans in South Africa have joined other Southern African countries in solidarity with Zimbabwe again in a mobilized, one-spirited, original voice in denouncing and calling for the removal of sanctions in Zimbabwe. Every year since 2019, African leaders have commemorated October 25th as Anti-Sanctions Day to protest against the long-standing restrictions on trade and commerce with Zimbabwe imposed by the United States, United Kingdom, European Union and their allies. Now the sanctions, some of which dates back to 20 years, were imposed in response to alleged election rigging and rights abuses under former President Robert Mugabe, who died in 2019. News Central's correspondent Bonganzi Siziba has been covering the rally live, and she spoke with the chairperson, Anti-Sanctions Committee, Walter Mbongolwani, on the ongoing rally.
Yes, coming to you live from the United States of America Embassy here in Pretoria. As you can see behind me, these are Zimbabweans and South Africans also who are here in solidarity with Zimbabweans on the sanctions. We know that 25 October is a day that was rather set aside by the SADC and also endorsed by the SADC. And this kind of gathering is not only happening here in South Africa. We also hear that there are so many gatherings that are happening all over the world in solidarity with Zimbabweans on the sanctions. And these people here, they are still coming. They said that more of them are still coming here just to register their concerns here at the US Embassy to say that the sanctions in Zimbabwe should be lifted, because these sanctions are causing a lot of suffering for most of the Zimbabweans who are abroad and also Zimbabweans.
Well, to discuss this, we're joined by Simba Chitando, a Zimbabwean. He joins us all the way from Johannesburg. Thank you so much for joining us, Simba, on the news this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Greetings to your audience.
All right. So, Simba, as a Zimbabwean, how do you feel about the Anti-Sanctions Day, and how have these sanctions affected ordinary Zimbabweans in their daily lives and also the economy of Zimbabwe?
Thank you. That's a very good question. These sanctions have affected the Zimbabweans in two respects. The first is the ZIDERA, which is part of the sanctions, puts a restriction on the Zimbabwean government accessing multi-lending institutions, the global financial community. And because of that, the government cannot get the finance required to develop the economy, to work with the hospitals, for instance, hospital infrastructure, just basically any infrastructure in the country. It's been restricted from that. Then you have OFAC sanctions, which targets individuals and companies directly and prevents those individuals and companies throughout the world to get any finance throughout the world. And you have prominent business people and companies, including some of Zimbabwe's biggest mining companies and Zimbabwe's wealthiest individuals, from accessing international credit and other banks throughout the world. And obviously what that has led to is loss of jobs. Last year, just an example, Fossil Constructing was put on the sanctions list, and they just they just basically are involved in road construction.
All right, Simba. Now, if you can actually tell us, how do you think that the government should address the issues created by these sanctions, and what efforts have actually been made so far?
Well, the government is on the right path in getting support from the international community and the African community more specifically, as you've seen in the lead up to my interview. It's the SADC has set aside a day, and the AU is behind Zimbabwe. So what they're doing in getting the continent and the international community behind them. That's one. Two, what the government has been doing is finding innovative ways to do business, which has seen some economic growth. That growth could increase And obviously, the country would do better if the sanctions were removed. But with what the government has, it's doing the best it can. Then the third is to re-engage the people that have applied sanctions on Zimbabwe, the United States government being the leading country that has done so, and put pressure on them, show that the country is not a threat to anyone. Zimbabwe, as the president has said, is a friend to everyone and an enemy to nobody. We just want to do business, and basically arguing that the government is on track. But I do feel, I'm a lawyer and I advocate for anti-sanctions. Litigation should be considered, but for the reasons I've mentioned, of re-engagement and diplomacy, the Zimbabwean government is elected not to do that, and I respect that point of view. But what the government is doing is the best it can, and I'm happy with that.
All right, Simba, let's talk about the protests happening at the Embassy of the United States. Now, in your opinion, are there any alternative approaches or solutions that you believe could be explored instead of relying solely on protests?
Well, we have to look at where the government is, and the government, Zimbabwe is a country of 17 million people. It is a third part of the third world, part of the global south. So the power that the Zimbabwean government has is restricted to those constraints. As I said earlier, what the government is doing is the best it can possibly do under sanctions that have been in place for more than 20 years. So I do think that diplomacy is what the government is doing, and it is what all the government can really do. Finding innovative ways to do business, notwithstanding the sanctions. But I believe that the citizenry, the Zimbabwean nationals, like myself, I'm not in government, although I do support the government, should put pressure, as we have been doing in today's protests, and also litigate. We are involved in litigation right now against the American government to declare the sanctions illegal in South Africa, in Africa, and internationally. Iran has done so successfully. Several other countries who have been illegally put on sanctions. You must note that sanctions without UN approval are illegal.
All right, sadly, Simba, we have to go now, but thank you so much for your time, and we do hope that solutions are actually found to end the sanctions on Zimbabwe. But thank you so much. We appreciate you for your time.
Thank you for having me.